The most dangerous men are usually the quietest ones, and the night my daughter ran toward a mafia boss for help, I realized monsters sometimes recognize each other. The rain slammed against the windows of Rosie's diner hard enough to rattle the old neon sign outside, washing the streets of Brooklyn in blurry red and blue reflections that looked almost unreal at 11:40 on a Thursday night. My hands shook as I poured coffee into a chipped ceramic mug for table 6, careful not to spill because Rosie docked paychecks for broken dishes and I was already 2 weeks behind on rent. Concealer covered most of the bruise near my collarbone, but not perfectly. Nothing covered exhaustion perfectly. Especially not after another argument with Eric 3 hours earlier. "Mama, I'm sleepy," Lily whispered from the corner booth near the pie display, her tiny head resting against the cracked leather seat while she hugged her stuffed rabbit against her chest. 6 years old and already learning how to stay quiet when adults were angry. The thought made something ache inside me worse than the bruise hidden under my long sleeves. 10 more minutes, baby," I whispered back. "Then we'll go home." Home. The word barely meant anything anymore. Just a cramped apartment filled with tension and careful silence and the constant fear of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. The diner bell chimed as the front door opened, letting in a gust of cold November rain along with 4 men in black coats. Every conversation in the diner lowered half a level. Not stopped. Just softened. Like people instinctively understood they should avoid drawing attention. The man in front was taller than the others, broad shoulders stretching beneath a charcoal overcoat tailored too perfectly to belong anywhere near this neighborhood. Dark hair slicked back. Clean jawline. Gray eyes colder than the storm outside. He moved calmly, but the room shifted around him anyway. Like gravity had changed direction. Rosie herself rushed from the kitchen, suddenly smiling too hard. "Mr. Moretti," she said nervously. "Your usual booth is ready." The man nodded once without speaking. Damien Moretti. Even I knew that name. Everyone in Brooklyn did. Some people called him a businessman. Others lowered their voices and called him something else entirely. But nobody said his name loudly. I looked down immediately, grabbing menus before Rosie could yell at me. "Claire," she hissed under her breath. "You take table 9. And don't screw it up." My stomach tightened as I walked toward them carrying 4 glasses of ice water on a tray that suddenly felt heavier than concrete. Damien sat at the center booth while the others positioned themselves around him automatically, like planets orbiting something dangerous. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Not because he was loud. Because he wasn't. Men like Eric filled rooms with shouting and threats. Men like Damien Moretti didn't need to raise their voice at all. "Coffee?" I asked quietly, keeping my eyes on the table. "Black," he replied. Deep voice. Controlled. The kind of voice that made people listen without understanding why. I nodded quickly and reached for the water glasses, but my sleeve slid back for half a second. Long enough. His eyes dropped to the fading fingerprints around my wrist. My breath caught. I pulled the sleeve down immediately. "Sorry," I muttered. "Clumsy tonight." He didn't answer right away. I could feel his gaze lingering there like a weight against my skin. Then finally, "You're bleeding." I blinked in confusion before noticing the tiny cut across my knuckle where a plate had cracked earlier. "It's nothing," I said automatically. "Claire." Lily's tiny voice drifted from the booth behind me. "Mama," I turned instantly. Her little face looked pale now. Frightened. Before I could move, the diner door burst open again so hard it slammed against the wall. The sound echoed through the entire restaurant. And when I saw Eric standing there soaked from the rain with anger burning behind his eyes, every bit of warmth disappeared from my body. The moment Eric stepped into the diner, Lily slid off the booth seat so fast her stuffed rabbit hit the floor. Fear changed children in ways adults like to ignore. It made them quiet too early. Careful too young. I saw it every day in my daughter's eyes, and the guilt of that. nearly crushed me alive. Rainwater dripped from Eric's leather jacket onto the black and white tile floor while his jaw tightened the second he spotted me standing beside Damien Moretti's table. "Claire," he called sharply, loud enough to turn heads across the diner. "We are leaving. Now." My stomach twisted hard. Not because of the words. Because of the tone. I knew that tone. It meant he had already decided how the night would end. "Mama," Lily whispered again, smaller this time. Damien remained seated behind me, silent, one hand resting near his untouched coffee cup while his gray eyes studied Eric with the same calm expression someone might use watching a storm roll in from miles away. One of the men beside him shifted slightly in his seat. "Not nervous. Ready." "Eric, please," I said quietly. "Do not do this here." "Do what?" he snapped, spreading his hands dramatically. "Come pick up my girlfriend and my kid? That makes me the bad guy now." Rosie disappeared into the kitchen immediately. Coward. Smart coward maybe, but still a coward. The other customers suddenly became fascinated with their fries and pie slices. Nobody looked directly at us anymore. That was Brooklyn. People survived by pretending not to notice trouble. Eric stepped closer, and the sharp smell of whiskey hit me instantly beneath the rain. "You ignore my calls for 3 hours, he continued. "Then I find you here flirting with rich businessmen." Heat rushed into my face. "I am working. You think I am stupid?" Lily suddenly ran toward me, wrapping both arms around my waist so tightly I nearly lost balance. Her tiny fingers trembled through my uniform apron. "Mama, can we go home?" she whispered. Eric looked down at her, irritation flashing across his face. "Lily, stay out of adult conversations." She flinched immediately. That tiny movement almost hurt worse than anything else. Damien noticed it too. I knew because I finally looked at him, and something colder had settled behind his eyes. Not anger exactly. Calculation. Eric reached for my arm. Not hard. Not enough to leave marks this time. But Lily gasped anyway, like she already expected the worst. I said we are leaving. Then Damien spoke for the first time since Eric walked in. "Take your hand off her." Quiet voice. Calm voice. Somehow more dangerous because of it. Eric turned slowly. "Excuse me." Damien leaned back slightly in the booth, expression unreadable beneath the soft amber diner lights. "You are upsetting the child." One of Eric's laughs escaped, bitter and sharp. "This your business now?" Damien glanced at Lily clutching my waist before looking back at him. It became my business when she got scared. Silence swallowed the diner. Heavy silence. Eric looked around like he suddenly realized everyone had stopped pretending not to listen. "Listen, man," he muttered, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is family stuff." Damien nodded once. "Then why does your family look terrified of you?" My pulse started hammering so hard it hurt. Eric's face darkened instantly. I knew that expression too. The dangerous one. The one that usually came right before slammed doors and broken dishes and apologies the next morning. "Claire," he said through clenched teeth. "Get your daughter. We are done here." But Lily tightened her grip around me instead. And then she did something that changed everything. She looked past me directly at Damien Moretti with tears shining in her eyes and whispered, "Please do not let him take my mama home." I stopped breathing. Eric froze. And for the first time all night, the room no longer felt cold. It felt deadly still. People think fear is loud. It is not. Real fear is quiet. It is a little girl holding her breath while adults decide whether her world stays standing another night. Nobody in Rosie's diner moved after Lily spoke. The sound of rain against the windows suddenly felt too loud, too sharp, filling every inch of silence between us. Eric stared at Lily like he could not believe she had betrayed him in front of strangers. That was the worst part about men like him. They cared more about humiliation than the damage they caused. "What did you just say?" he asked slowly. Lily shrank behind me immediately. Her small fingers twisted into the fabric of my apron while I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "She is tired," I said quickly, heart slamming against my ribs. "She does not know what she is saying." Damien's gaze never left Eric. Children usually know exactly what they are saying. One of the men beside Damien stood quietly from the booth. Tall. Broad shoulders. Black gloves. He did not threaten anyone. He just stood there, and somehow the entire room felt smaller because of it. Eric noticed too. His confidence cracked for half a second before anger rushed back to fill the space. "You think you know something about my family because of one stupid comment," he snapped. Damien reached for his coffee cup calmly, taking a slow sip before answering. "No," his voice stayed level. "Controlled. I know enough because she flinched when you walked in." Eric laughed again, but this time the sound was thinner. Less certain. "This is insane." He pointed toward me sharply. "Claire, tell them." My mouth went dry. I should have fixed it. Smoothed things over like always. That was how survival worked. Calm him down. Keep the peace. Protect Lily from worse later. But when I looked down at my daughter's terrified face, the lie would not come out. Damien noticed my silence immediately. Of course he did. Men like him probably survived by reading hesitation before bullets. Eric took one step closer. "We are leaving." Lily started crying softly against my side. Tiny sounds. Broken little breaths that sliced straight through me. "Please," she whispered. "Please do not make Mama go." Something changed in Damien's expression then. Barely noticeable. A small shift near his eyes. But the temperature in the room dropped anyway. "You should leave alone," he said quietly to Eric. The diner lights buzzed overhead while thunder rolled somewhere far outside across the city. Eric stared at Damien for 3 long seconds before scoffing. "And if I do not?" Nobody answered immediately. One of Damien's men walked toward the diner entrance and locked the front door with a soft click. My pulse spiked instantly. Eric noticed too because his shoulders stiffened. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. Damien finally stood. Slowly. Calmly. Expensively dressed danger unfolding to his full height beneath the amber lights of the diner. He was taller than Eric by at least 4 inches, broader too, but it was not size that made Eric step backward instinctively. It was certainty. Damien looked like a man who had never once doubted the outcome of a situation in his life. "You are frightening a child," Damien said. "Inside a public restaurant. While putting your hands on her mother." His voice never rose. Somehow that made every word hit harder. Eric glanced around desperately now, finally realizing nobody in the diner was going to help him. Rosie stayed hidden in the kitchen. Customers avoided eye contact completely. Even the storm outside felt like it was holding its breath. "This is not your business," Eric muttered again, weaker this time. Damien adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat with almost lazy precision. "It is now." Then he looked at me for the first time since standing up. Not at the bruises. Not at the fear. At me. Fully. "Claire," he said calmly, "do you want to leave with him tonight?" The question hit harder than shouting ever could because nobody had asked me what I wanted in a very long time. The question stayed hanging in the air so long I could hear the refrigerator behind the counter humming beneath the storm outside. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Damien Moretti stood across from me in the middle of Rosie's diner like the entire city had paused waiting for my answer. And the terrifying part was not his reputation. It was how safe Lily suddenly looked standing beside him. Eric's eyes locked onto mine immediately, sharp with warning. I knew that look better than my own reflection. The silent promise hidden underneath it. Say the wrong thing now and you will regret it later. My throat tightened. Claire, Eric said quietly, forcing calm into his voice. Baby, come on. Let us go home. Baby. He only used soft words when other people were watching. Lily pressed closer against me instead. Damien noticed every detail. Of course he did. He noticed the way my shoulders stiffened at Eric's tone. The way my daughter would not even look at the man who claimed to love us. The way my fingers trembled while gripping Lily's jacket. Claire. Eric's voice sharpened slightly. Answer him. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the truth felt dangerous. Not dangerous like shouting or broken plates. Dangerous because once spoken aloud, it could not be taken back. Damien slipped one hand into the pocket of his coat, calm as ever. That is enough, he said quietly. Eric snapped toward him instantly. Stay out of this. You keep repeating that, Damien replied. And yet here we are. The men behind him stayed perfectly silent. No threats. No movement. Somehow that made everything worse. They looked disciplined. Controlled. Like violence was something they understood too well to ever need to advertise. Eric laughed nervously and ran a hand through his wet hair. You rich guys think you can solve everything with intimidation. Damien tilted his head slightly. No, a pause. Experience taught me most men intimidate themselves. Eric stepped forward before I could react. Listen carefully, he hissed. You do not know who you are talking to. For the first time all night, one of Damien's men almost smiled. Tiny reaction. Gone instantly. Damien himself remained expressionless. I know exactly who I am talking to, he said. Then his gaze shifted briefly toward my wrist where the bruises still hid beneath cheap makeup and long sleeves. The problem is that you believe nobody else notices. Shame rushed hot across my skin. Eric followed his eyes toward my arm and immediately looked back at me with fury burning beneath the surface now. Panic twisted inside my chest. I knew what would happen later if this kept escalating. Eric took another step toward me. Claire. Coat. Now. Lily started crying harder. Please stop yelling, she whispered. Please. Damien moved then. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one step sideways until he stood slightly between us. The movement was so smooth I barely noticed it happen. Eric did. His face drained of color immediately. You should leave, Damien said calmly. Alone. Or what? Eric demanded. Outside, thunder cracked across Brooklyn loud enough to shake the diner windows. Damien looked toward the storm for half a second before answering. Or your daughter remembers tonight for the rest of her life. The words hit me. Harder than anything else had. Because Lily already would. Children carried fear forever. I knew that now. Eric looked around the diner again, searching for control that no longer existed. Even he could feel it slipping away. The balance had changed the second Lily asked another man for protection instead of him. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Then finally he pointed at me with shaking anger. You think this man cares about you, he snapped. You do not even know what he is. Damien's expression never changed. No, he said softly. But she knows what you are. Silence swallowed the room again. Heavy. Suffocating. And for the first time in nearly 3 years, Eric looked afraid instead of me. Eric backed toward the diner door slowly, but anger still burned behind his eyes like something desperate and unstable. Men like him hated losing control more than they hated consequences. That was what made them dangerous. Rain hammered the glass behind him while neon light painted the puddles outside blood red and electric blue. Nobody in the diner moved until he pointed at me one last time. "This is not over," he muttered. My stomach dropped instantly because I knew he meant it. Damien did too. I could tell by the way his expression hardened almost invisibly. One of his men unlocked the front door without being asked. Eric shoved it open hard enough to rattle the frame before disappearing into the storm outside. The second the door slammed shut behind him, my knees nearly gave out from relief. Lily buried her face against my stomach, still crying softly while I held her tighter than I ever had before. The diner stayed silent another few seconds before conversation slowly started returning booth by booth like people were pretending none of this had happened. That was New York. Nobody wanted trouble sticking to them. Rosie finally emerged from the kitchen wiping her hands nervously on a dish towel. "Claire," she whispered sharply. "Take 5. I almost laughed at how absurd that sounded after everything. Take 5. Like my entire life had not just cracked open under fluorescent diner lights. Damien sat back down calmly at the booth as though storms and fear and trembling little girls were all ordinary parts of a Thursday night. One of his men slid silently into the booth across from him again while another returned to the entrance. Efficient. Controlled. Like they had done this before. Many times. "Mama?" Lily whispered shakily. "Is he gone?" I brushed damp blonde hair away from her face. "Yes, baby." She looked toward Damien cautiously. "Did the scary man leave because of him?" My throat tightened instantly. Children asked questions adults spent years avoiding. Damien glanced at Lily for a moment before answering himself. "The scary man left because you were brave enough to speak." Lily stared at him with wide blue eyes, still clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. "Most grown-ups do not help," she whispered. Something unreadable flickered across Damien's face. Not pity. Something sadder than that. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded white handkerchief, placing it carefully on the table near me. Only then did I realize my hand was bleeding again from where my nails had dug into my skin during the argument. "Thank you," I murmured automatically. "Do not thank me yet." His voice stayed calm, but the words settled heavily in my chest anyway. One of his men approached quietly from behind. "Boss." Damien looked up slightly. The man leaned close enough that only Damien should have heard him, but the diner had become so quiet again I still caught fragments. Vehicles circled the block twice. Fear flooded me cold and immediate. "Eric." Damien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "How long?" 7 minutes. Damien nodded once. "He is waiting outside." "Looks that way." Lily noticed the change in my expression instantly. "Mama," she whispered nervously. I could barely breathe now. Eric waiting outside in the parking lot meant the real argument had not even started yet. My hands began trembling again while every terrible possibility rushed through my mind at once. Damien looked at me steadily across the booth. "You cannot take that child home tonight." The words hit hard because deep down I already knew he was right. "I do not have anywhere else," I admitted quietly. Before I could stop myself. Shame burned immediately afterward. I hated sounding helpless. Damien studied me silently for several long seconds. Rainwater streaked down the diner windows behind him while thunder rolled somewhere over Manhattan in the distance. Then finally he stood again, buttoning his charcoal coat with slow deliberate movements. "You do now," he said softly. And for some reason, that frightened me almost as much as Eric waiting outside. Trust is a strange thing. Sometimes you spend years giving it to the wrong person, then one terrifying night your child hands it to a stranger without hesitation. I stared at Damien across the diner booth while rain streaked down the windows behind him in silver lines. My pulse still had not slowed down from hearing Eric was waiting outside. Every instinct inside me screamed that accepting help from a man like Damien Moretti was dangerous. But another quieter voice kept asking what exactly I was going back to if I refused. Lily climbed into the booth beside me, exhausted from crying, her small hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate Rosie had silently placed in front of her. The marshmallows were already melting. She kept glancing toward the windows nervously like she expected Eric's face to suddenly appear through the storm. Damien noticed that too. He noticed everything. "He will not come inside again," he said calmly. "How do you know?" I asked before I could stop myself. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. Something colder. Because I asked him not to. The way he said it sent chills down my arms. Not loud. Not threatening. Certain. One of his men approached quietly from the entrance. "The vehicle is still parked across the street." Damien nodded once. "Anyone else with him?" "No," Lily's tiny voice interrupted before Damien could answer again. "Mama?" I looked down immediately. "Yeah, baby." She leaned closer until her cheek pressed against my arm. "Can we stay with the nice man tonight?" My breath caught so hard it almost hurt. Nice man. If Lily had any idea who Damien Moretti really was according to every rumor in Brooklyn, she would never use words like nice. But children understood safety differently than adults. They trusted feelings before appearances. Damien looked away toward the rain-covered windows for a moment after hearing her question. Something about his expression shifted again. Softer this time. Almost uncomfortable. "Lily," I whispered carefully, "we do not know him. He helped us." Simple. Honest. Child logic. Damien finally looked back at me. "There is a hotel in Manhattan." "No," the answer came out too fast. Too sharp. "I am not taking charity." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You think safety is charity?" Shame burned across my face immediately. "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Claire?" My name sounded different in his voice. Steadier somehow. Like he was forcing me to hear myself clearly for the first time in years. I looked down at the table because I could not stand how directly he watched people. My throat tightened. "I do not want to owe anyone anything anymore." Silence settled between us again. Not awkward. Heavy. Damien leaned back slowly in the booth, studying me beneath the warm diner lights while jazz music played faintly from an old speaker near the kitchen. "Has he convinced you help always comes with punishment?" he asked quietly. The question hit too close to the truth. I swallowed hard without answering. That alone seemed to tell him enough. Lily yawned beside me, tiny shoulders drooping with exhaustion. Midnight had already passed. She should have been asleep hours ago instead of learning what fear looked like inside adults. Damien reached into his coat pocket again and placed a black business card carefully on the table. No flashy logo. Just his name. A phone number. Expensive simplicity. "You can refuse my help tonight if you want," he said calmly. "But eventually that man outside will lose patience." Thunder rolled again across the city. Lily jumped slightly at the sound. Damien's gaze shifted toward her instantly. Protective. Automatic. Like he had already decided something internally long before I realized it. "Children should not live afraid in their own homes," he said softly. My chest tightened painfully because no one had ever said that out loud before. Not social workers. Not neighbors. Not me. I looked toward the rain-covered windows where Eric's car still waited somewhere beyond the neon reflections and darkness. Then I looked back at Damien Moretti. The terrifying part was no longer whether I trusted him. The terrifying part was realizing I already trusted him more than the man I had spent 3 years living beside. By 12:30 in the morning, the storm outside had turned Manhattan into a blur of headlights and rainwater, but Damien Moretti's world moved through it untouched. That was the first thing I realized when we stepped outside Rosie's diner 20 minutes later. The city bent around men like him. 2 black SUVs waited at the curb with engines already running, their dark paint reflecting the neon diner sign in distorted streaks of red. One of Damien's men opened the rear passenger door without a word while another scanned the street carefully beneath the rain. Professional. Controlled. Prepared for things ordinary people never even imagined. Lily held my hand tightly as we stood beneath the diner awning. "Mama," she whispered nervously, "is Eric still here?" I looked across the street automatically and spotted his car parked half a block away beneath a flickering streetlight. My chest tightened instantly. Even through rain-covered windows, I could feel him watching us. Damien noticed my expression and followed my gaze calmly toward the vehicle. His jaw hardened slightly. "He will not follow us," he said. I wanted to ask how he could possibly guarantee that, but something inside me already knew the answer. Men like Damien did not make promises unless they intended to enforce them. "Claire." His voice pulled my attention back toward him. "Get in the car." The strange thing was that he did not sound controlling. He sounded certain. Like chaos was something he removed simply by deciding to. Lily climbed into the SUV first, clutching her stuffed rabbit while I hesitated beside the open door. Every survival instinct I had screamed that entering a mafia boss's vehicle in the middle of the night was the kind of decision women regretted in documentaries. But then Lily looked up from the back seat with sleepy blue eyes and asked softly, "Are we safe now?" Safe. Such a small word for something I had not felt in years. Damien stood beside the rain-soaked curb watching me carefully. Not impatient. Waiting. Giving me the choice. That mattered more than he probably realized. I finally slid into the leather back seat beside Lily while Damien entered from the opposite side moments later. The door shut softly behind him, sealing us inside warmth and silence thick enough to hear my own heartbeat. Outside, rain hammered the windows while Brooklyn drifted past in blurred streaks of storefront lights and empty sidewalks. Lily curled against my side almost immediately, exhausted from fear and crying and staying awake too late. Damien sat across from us facing forward, one hand resting loosely against his knee while city lights moved across the sharp angles of his face. Up close, he did not look cruel. That was the unsettling part. He looked composed. Like someone carrying storms internally instead of unleashing them outward. "She trusts you," I said quietly before I could stop myself. Damien glanced toward Lily sleeping against my shoulder. "Children are honest. Children are naive." His eyes shifted toward me slowly. "No. Adults just teach themselves to ignore instincts." Silence settled between us again while the SUV crossed the Williamsburg Bridge into Manhattan. I stared through rain-covered glass at the skyline glowing silver and gold against the darkness. Beautiful. Cold. Untouchable. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Somewhere secure." My stomach tightened slightly at the word secure. "You mean guarded. Those are not always different things." Fair point. One of the SUVs ahead changed lanes smoothly while Damien's driver followed without hesitation. Everything around him operated with precision. Like his entire life had been built around controlling outcomes before danger ever reached him. "Why are you helping us?" I asked quietly. Damien looked out the window for several long seconds before answering. "Because your daughter asked me to." The simplicity of the answer hit harder than dramatic speeches ever could. Lily shifted slightly in her sleep then murmured something unintelligible before her small hand reached instinctively toward Damien across the seat. Without hesitation, he gently took it in his larger one so she would settle again. The movement was automatic. Careful. Protective. And watching a feared man handle a frightened child with more gentleness than most fathers I had known suddenly made something inside me feel dangerously close to breaking. The hotel lobby looked like another planet compared to the life I had left behind in Brooklyn an hour earlier. Marble floors reflected golden chandelier light across polished walls while soft piano music drifted through the air so gently it almost felt unreal after the storm outside. People in expensive coats moved quietly through the lobby carrying shopping bags and room keys and perfectly controlled lives. Nobody looked bruised. Nobody looked afraid. Lily stared upward sleepily from my arms as we stepped out of the elevator-sized SUV beneath the covered entrance. "Mama," she whispered, "this place smells rich." One of Damien's men almost choked trying not to laugh. Even Damien's expression softened for half a second before disappearing again. A hotel employee rushed forward immediately the moment Damien entered the lobby. "Mr. Moretti." Respect changed people's voices. I noticed that now. Everyone around Damien sounded careful without meaning to. "Your suite is prepared," the man continued quickly. Damien nodded once before glancing toward me. "You and Lily will take the east rooms." The east rooms. Not a room. Rooms. My entire apartment could probably fit inside one floor of this building. "This is too much," I said quietly while adjusting Lily against my shoulder. Damien studied me calmly. "You are still apologizing for surviving." The words hit hard because they were true. I apologized for everything. Existing too loudly. Taking up space. Needing help. Even breathing sometimes felt inconvenient around Eric. One of Damien's men handed him a phone discreetly while we crossed the lobby toward private elevators hidden behind dark polished wood panels. Damien glanced at the screen briefly, and something colder settled behind his gray eyes. "What is it?" I asked before thinking. His gaze lifted toward me slowly. "Nothing you need to worry about tonight." Which obviously meant the opposite. The private elevator opened directly into the penthouse suite almost 30 floors above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city glowing silver beneath the storm clouds while soft jazz drifted quietly from hidden speakers somewhere inside the enormous space. Lily gasped softly the second she saw the skyline. "It looks like a movie," she whispered. I could barely process any of it myself. The penthouse felt less like an apartment and more like something powerful people used to hide from the world. Warm lighting. Dark wood. Expensive silence. Security disguised as luxury. One woman in a black suit waited near the kitchen area. Maybe late 40s. Calm eyes. Gentle expression. "This is Sophia," Damien explained. "She manages the residence." The woman smiled warmly toward Lily immediately. "I made grilled cheese sandwiches in case someone was hungry." Lily looked at me hopefully. "Please." I nearly cried right there over grilled cheese and kindness. "That would be wonderful," I whispered instead. Sophia guided Lily toward the kitchen while Damien removed his coat slowly near the windows overlooking Manhattan. Without it, he somehow looked even more dangerous. Broad shoulders beneath a black dress shirt with rolled sleeves revealing faint scars near one wrist. Not flashy scars. Old ones. Quiet ones. I should have been terrified standing alone in a penthouse with a man whispered about across New York. Instead I felt exhausted. "You can sleep here tonight," Damien said without turning around. "Tomorrow we discuss longer arrangements." "Why are you doing this?" I asked again softly. He finally looked back at me then. City lights reflected in his gray eyes like distant storms. "Because I know what fear inside a home feels like." My breath caught instantly. Something in his voice changed on that sentence. Barely noticeable. But real. "You?" I asked before I could stop myself. Damien gave a small humorless smile. "Power does not mean peace, Claire." The honesty of that unsettled me more than threats would have. Sophia returned carrying Lily. Half asleep against her shoulder while clutching half a grilled cheese sandwich in one tiny hand. Someone is done fighting bedtime, she whispered kindly. Lily lifted sleepy eyes toward Damien. Are you staying too? She mumbled. Damien froze slightly like nobody had asked him something so innocent in years. Yes, he answered quietly. Lily nodded once against Sophia's shoulder. Good. Then she fell asleep completely. And watching Damien Moretti stare at that sleeping little girl like she had just handed him something fragile and priceless made me realize the most dangerous thing about him was not what people feared he could do. It was how desperately he seemed to want to protect what little innocence still existed in the world. I woke up at 4:12 in the morning standing beside a floor-to-ceiling window 30 stories above Manhattan while rain crawled slowly down the glass like silver tears. For a few disoriented seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the city beneath me glowing quietly in the darkness and remembered everything at once. Rosie's diner. Eric's face. Lily crying. Damien Moretti asking me what I wanted like my answer actually mattered. The oversized sweater Sophia had given me hung loosely against my skin while the penthouse remained almost impossibly silent around me. Safe silent. Not the dangerous kind where you waited for footsteps or slammed doors. Just stillness. I had forgotten silence could exist without fear hiding inside it. You should be sleeping. Damien's voice came from behind me low and calm enough to make me jump anyway. I turned quickly. He stood near the kitchen area without his suit jacket now, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms while steam rose from a coffee mug in his hand. Even at 4 in the morning he looked composed. Like exhaustion was something ordinary people experienced, not him. Sorry, I whispered automatically. I did not mean to wake anyone. His gray eyes narrowed slightly. You apologize too much. The strange thing was he never said cruel things cruelly. He said them like observations. Truths nobody else bothered noticing. I looked back toward the rain-covered skyline. I am not used to places like this. Neither was I once. That surprised me enough to glance at him again. Damien stepped beside the window, close enough that I caught the clean scent of cedar and expensive coffee. Manhattan lights reflected softly across the sharp angles of his face. People see power, he said quietly. They assume you were born with it. Were you not? A small humorless smile touched his mouth. No one is born feared, Claire. Something about the sentence lingered heavily between us. I wanted to ask questions. About the scars on his wrist. About the sadness hidden beneath all that control. About how a man whispered about across New York could hold a frightened child's hand so gently. But survival had taught me not to ask dangerous men personal things. Lily likes you, I said instead. Damien looked toward the hallway leading to the guest rooms where she slept peacefully for the first time in months. She should like safer people. Maybe she knows the difference between dangerous and cruel. His eyes shifted toward me slowly then. Really looked at me. The air felt suddenly too warm inside the penthouse. Too quiet. Most adults never learn that difference, he said softly. My heartbeat stumbled awkwardly against my ribs. I looked away first. Outside, dawn had started bleeding pale gray across the edges of Manhattan while rain finally slowed against the windows. Somewhere below us the city kept moving. Millions of people rushing through another ordinary Friday morning without realizing how quickly entire lives could change overnight. Damien's phone buzzed against the marble counter behind us. One glance at the screen hardened his expression instantly. What is it? I asked carefully. He stayed silent for half a second too long. Your apartment building. Fear flooded cold through me. What happened? A fire alarm was triggered around 2 this morning. My stomach dropped violently. Lily's room, everyone evacuated safely, he interrupted calmly. No injuries. Relief nearly buckled my knees. Damien watched me carefully before adding, your neighbor reported seeing Eric there before emergency services arrived. Ice spread through my chest. Even here. even 30 floors above. Manhattan surrounded by security and silence and expensive marble, fear still found me. Damien set his untouched coffee cup down slowly. He will not reach you again, he said. Not dramatic. Not loud. Absolute. I believed him immediately, and that realization terrified me more than anything else had all night. Because trust did not happen all at once. It happened quietly. In little moments. A child sleeping peacefully. A locked elevator. A man standing beside you at 4 a.m. making the world feel less frightening instead of more. Lily's sleepy voice suddenly drifted from the hallway behind us. Mama? I turned instantly as she padded barefoot into the living room clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her blonde curls were messy from sleep while dawn light painted soft gold across her tiny face. She looked at Damien first before looking at me. He stayed, she whispered happily. Damien actually blinked at that like the words caught him off guard. Lily walked directly toward him without fear and reached for his hand the same way children reached toward people they trusted instinctively. Good men always leave, she said sleepily. But you stayed. Silence filled the penthouse after that. Heavy. Honest. Damien looked down at her tiny hand wrapped around his larger one, and for the first time since I met him, the mask slipped completely. Just for a second. Enough for me to see it. Loneliness. Deep and ancient and carefully hidden beneath power and tailored suits and dangerous reputation. Then Lily smiled up at him softly and whispered, I think you are one of the good ones. And somehow the most feared man in New York suddenly looked like someone trying very hard to believe her.